What we wanted to do with the record was to bring in some people to shoot video, also to shoot pictures throughout the process, and really to attempt to capture the idea of a work in progress. Mike came up with the idea that he thinks one of the coolest things about anything creative, whether it's art or music, is that work and that blood, sweat, and tears that goes into the process. It's kind of a labor of love to get from point A to point B, and most people don't get to see that. They just get to see what comes after. They get to see the final product. We wanted to have video and photography done while we're in the studio.
Always, as an artist, you're judged based on the body of work you've put out ultimately, but what people focus on is whatever you've done most recently.
I think the pressure is motivating. It's there, but I really try not to focus on it.
I'm more comfortable when there's a lot to be expected.
I think we're all deadline or pressure performers.
I want to be in the mix, have the pressure.
When we just started writing, we were still on the road.
We worked on the bus. You could see how small a space that was. I mean, it was smaller than this couch. It's like a little box, and you couldn't even stand up straight in it.
So this is our studio. This is where making the magic happen in the back of the bus. We got Mike Shinoda here, working on some stuff.
We came up with a lot of stuff there. I think that we came up with some really cool guitar stuff and a lot of good samples.
I write a lot of my string stuff and the sample instrumentation on this keyboard, this Roland synthesizer. We've got a string card.
The nicest thing about having any recording equipment on the road, it allows you to capture that moment of spontaneity.
Something about that energy of just having figured it out is important. If you listen to it 3 years later, you'll still hear that energy.
One song that's in the DVD that is in the album is the intro for Somewhere I Belong.
I was writing, coming up with ideas on my own on acoustic guitar, and I'd come up with that part.
I thought the chord progression was great. I love that. And this is what happens between our band members. One guy will play something and the other guy will say, okay, I like the chord progression, but the sound of the acoustic guitar was too folky.
And we didn't really know what to do with it, so we flipped it back.
Dude, how's that? This is the product of Joe Hahn, Mike Shinoda, and Chester Bennington. Yeah, that's so good.
Since I reversed it, it was playing, 4, 3, 2, 1. The chord progression was reversed. And I said, okay, the sound sounds good now, but the chord progression was what I liked. So then I cut it into 4 pieces, and I played it 4, 3, it was 4, 3, 2, 1. I played it 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's why it has that sweeping sound that you hear on Somewhere I Belong.
Through that process, given that 18 months, we probably wrote 80 different songs. It was at that point where we wrote our sophomore album, that cursed album that just kind of always flops. And then we just junked it.
After we came home from tour, that's when the album pre-production began. In our case, what we do in pre-production is try and get the music as solid as possible.
There's a lot of commercial pressure that I think people try and put on us or think that is there, and it kind of is there in a way.
Whatever's there doesn't compare to the pressure we put on ourselves artistically. I think Hybrid Theory is really good. I'm really proud of it. Sometimes I even listen to it and I go, man, how did we do that, And the way that you do it is you invest a lot of time and energy into these songs.
When we write songs, we're not really a jam band. We won't sit there together and just jam on our instruments and say, hey, that sounded cool, play it again, and we'll try and all write stuff together.
Brad, what are you doing?
I think we would kill each other if we tried to do that.
At my home studio, what we tend to do is work in pairs.
Mike's always involved in all the songs because he's kind of like the glue in that he knows how to use the Pro Tools rig, and he's really good at working with people one-on-one in terms of putting their parts down.
Just drag it out, remember.
definitely different for me, whereas anybody else in the band can just go over to Mike's house with their vocals or guitar or whatever, but for me, it's easy to leave the drums in one place and actually bring the other music that's been worked on to me.
You put me and Mike in a room together writing music, and I'd say it's like, there's a good percentage of stuff that comes out that's just joke songs. Some stuff turns out insanely bad.
As we were getting close to finishing pre-production, it came time to decide on a producer.
We wanted to look around and kind of scope out what else we might be able to do.
But when it came down to it, I think Don had really good insight of who we are as a band.
Looking inside the mind of Don Gilmore. Ooh, come inside.
For me, as a producer, working with artists like Linkin Park that really want their music to be as good as it can be, we'll rip a song to shreds and then build it back up and then rip it down again if that's what it takes.
I remember having our preliminary meeting with Don and him saying that he thought we should go into the studio in like 2 weeks from that day. And that was literally right when we finished Reanimation. And I remember just like freaking out.
We got a group of guys who are perfectionists and want to like fix every part a million times. Eventually, you just get, you know, fixing things that were already fixed, and you get yourself into a crazy place where everything is just supposedly wrong.
Everybody knew how much pain and frustration went into making Hybrid Theory, and so now the challenge was putting in that much work into the next record.
For me, I really put most of my work in before actually going to the studio. Right now we're down at my rehearsal space. This is my drum set. I also have triggers on my kit. All the sampled sounds that you hear on the album come out through these triggers. Every time I come into the studio, I take off my other shoes and I put on my drumming shoes. They're actually modeled after race car driving shoes. You can really feel the pedals and everything, and it gives a lot more control. Back here, I got a Pro Tools rig. I'm able to record all of my drums right here onto the hard disk of my computer. That's something that's really different for this album. When I did all the drums for Hybrid Theory, I had a 4-track and a room mic taped to the ceiling. This time, I was able to use the computer to help come up with drum parts. I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day practicing, almost 7 days a week. I had dreams about drums. I had dreams about drum fills that like I practiced the day before and I couldn't get right. It was just constant like drum craziness.
Rob works so hard. From Hybrid Theory to where he is now is two completely different people. The preparation he put into this record was unbelievable, and it shows.
We kind of had a joke that since the first record did so well, we were going to do everything the same, including starting out, you know, in an RV, having Mike drive to all the shows. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. Probably not. But at least for the first process, it's pretty similar because we're back at NRG, the studio that we recorded the first album at, and we're using Don Gilmore, who did Hybrid Theory.
NRG is a studio where a lot of really influential and like best-selling records have been made.
311, Peter Roach, Sugar Ray.
Sensible Pilots. Coming in here the first time, it's a little overwhelming because you see the level of expectations.
You think, well, all these good records have been done there. How am I going to make a record that's that good?
Jimi Hendrix did a record here 30 years after he died. That's how cool this place is.
We record all the songs as demos before we actually go into the studio. So we actually have basically finished versions of the songs before we even start recording. But once we get into the studio, we track individually. So Rob tracks first, then I did guitars next, followed by Phoenix, and then Joe scratched before Mike and Chester finished the process.
Once you're in the studio and everything is practiced and you know what you're going to play, it all comes down to giving a great performance. Every take you do in the studio needs to be 1000% the way you would want it to be listened to over and over again on the album.
He's really fast, really tight. Last couple times we went into studios to record, he only took 3 days, 4 days. This time, I'm figuring probably about 4 or 5.
So we had an art day down in Los Angeles. We brought in Delta to do a lot of spray painting and that kind of stuff, and just kind of documented that to show in a separate way the album artwork kind of coming together and being created.
The art day is like an artistic depiction of the work in progress.
The 6 of us together can actually add on to what each other is doing and create something that alone we'd never be able to put together.
To me, that relates directly to what the album is all about. Throughout the day, we were painting on something and then painting over it and painting over it. You see this thing come together.
Can you feel the art happening?
You see a lot of words on the mural. It was almost like a documentation of what was going on with the songs that day in the life of the album. When we were touring last year, we saw Delta's stuff in magazines. We wanted the album to be epic, and these interesting cubist satellites that he was painting were exactly that.
It was James Minchin that actually took a picture of one point of Delta spray painting some stuff, which became the cover.
This is the like Christmas time after the fun art thing. Take all the paint home.
We're in the control room at Energy right now, and we're actually tracking right now. I do all my tracking inside the control room as opposed to out in the big drum room where Rob would track. And most of the time I spend tuning, but I have to tune before every pass. I've probably tuned about probably 1,000 times. I think a guitar sound is a pretty specific, nuancy thing. I didn't want to do what we did last time. I wanted to take risks and do something that still sounded like Linkin Park, but that took the music in a new direction. I like music that's really cinematic, that has a really huge sonic landscape. I do a lot of layering of the guitar to create a really big sound. See where those rugs are rolled up? That's where the drums were. Now they're gone because they rattle. Got the cabinets out in the main room, and then you can see like amp heads and everything are in here. I can't give away all the secrets of how we achieve
442.
the sound. I want people to push me, and at the same time, I think what's great about the band is that people are open to having people push them.
Brad's contribution was really critical this time around. He really forced us to take a hard look at everything to make sure it was perfect.
When I'm in there tracking guitar, I like to be really focused and not have a lot of distractions going on around me. James came in and shot some photos one day in the control room, which was somewhat unusual because Don keeps a really focused work environment. Doing those photos, which were kind of press photos to let people know that we were in the studio. So it was funny that day to kind of see Don's expression or his dismay at the kind of almost circus-like atmosphere that was taking place.
You ready? We're ready. It's fired up. I've recorded with Mike, I've recorded with Brad, I've recorded with everybody in the band for years and years and years, even starting before Hybrid Theory. But sitting down with Don for the first time, there's always just that feeling of like questioning how great of a player you actually are.
He laces the track.
You lace the track, Don. I lock the flow.
That's what it is, okay.
I think the fact that Don was a bass player just really helped me to realize that he was smarter than your average person. In general, you know, bass players are smarter.
There was so much brain power in here when these bass tracks were going down. It was just almost too much.
I don't gravitate towards flashy bass playing, but instead I want to find ways to be linking what Brad's doing with the melody and what Rob's doing with the rhythm, but also to be able to do that in a way that's creative. This is volume, so you just put that at 11, and you're ready to go. In here we have the sound room where we mic all of our amps. We got guitar cabinets all lined up. We stick them in here because they get pretty loud, and we don't want to listen to them at full volume, so we sit in there. I don't know if you can really see it because of the light. That's the control room. And then the stuff's being mic'd in here. You have the my amps, my cabinets. Yes, Brad has 3 cabinets, I have 2 cabinets. But if you do a speaker count, because mine has 8 per cabinet and Brad's only has 4, he's got 12, but I've got 16 speakers. 16 is better than 12. Swim down there.
Cold, huh? I'm braver than him. I take it like a man.
The photo days were difficult in the sense that they took away from the album for a day or two, but they're necessary evils. We want to put stuff out there and connect everything with the imagery that represents it.
I feel like I'm taping Amateur Jackass.
The photo shoot we did at the Ambassador Hotel was actually really eerie. There's just this tension amongst everybody because the place is just nasty. Gradually, as we were there, you hear more and more stories about this was where such and such was assassinated and they pulled the body into this kitchen that you're now taking photos in.
One of the guys who was doing security for us that day, he was telling us that he grew up in a house with poltergeists and that this place was definitely haunted.
We're all gonna die.
Love it.
Whether he was just trying to spook us or not, that wasn't cool.
Once we kind of moved into the hotel, the whole point was just to scare the crap out of each other.
For us, if a photo shoot isn't dangerous, it's not a good photo shoot.
Some people were scared.
There's the old lady. You hear that? Is it going up? Ding dong, bang, bang, bang.
There was a time at the end of the day when we were all in the elevator and Chester was talking about what had happened earlier, something that spooked him a little bit earlier.
Yeah, party elevator. I think there's music. Listen to the music.
That was weird. There was music and it said going up.
Just as he said it, the elevator stopped.
Oh. Oh my.
It's not good.
Bottom floor?
Is that bottom?
No, that would be the elevator not being on.
No way.
Open the door. There we go.
Whoa, you got that on tape, right?
Yeah.
They did it again.
It's a power thing.
It's scary.
Oh my.
Now, mind you, there's nobody else in this hotel who would have stopped the elevator. It was complete coincidence, or it was something very weird going on.
Okay, so everybody's freaking out about the elevator, right? I'm gonna keep it kind of quiet right now. But there's a little switch in it. It's an on and off switch. You toggle it, it just stops the elevator. You know, riding down, everyone's telling ghost stories. Blow! There's now a ghost in the elevator. Thank you very much. Turn it back on. Blow! It stops again. Everybody's scared. Turn it back on.
I wasn't nervous about going back to recording the album at all. I was more eager than anything to just create something new.
Studio, I'm just doing a lot of scratching and
doing some programming, just atmospheric sounds, and just adding more flavor on top of what's there. Trying to take away from the rock vibe. You got your cake, your layers of cake, and I'm putting all the dressing and flowers on top of it. I use tons of equipment.
This is Mount Han.
Yeah, Mount Han.
This is all Joseph coming right here.
Don Gilmore hasn't really worked with any DJs. For him, it's kind of uncharted territory. If it's distracting, then he'll say it's distracting. And if it's good, then he'll say, oh, I think that's cool. So it's like when we're in the studio, it's pretty much me and Mike.
Where's Johan coming in through now?
Mike and I, we usually come up with all the sounds.
Our samples aren't samples of other people's music. They're samples of experiments that we've done.
In the last year, the CD turntables have come out and become, you know, like easy to get and use. So the first record, it took a long time because we had to press vinyl up and scratch the vinyl. This time, we can think of an idea and immediately put it on a CD and scratch that. Chester and I, as we're doing vocals, will think up ideas of, oh yeah, you know, instead of us just singing this part, he could scratch this.
Need spots to...
Our songs are on the average 39% scratching and 5 to 8% keyboard. The rest of the percent is bobbing my head up and down.
Hey, it's Mike.
One song is a song that I really have been trying to write. I've wanted to write it for quite a while, probably like 5 years or 6 years. It's a song called Breaking the Habit. Don was listening to the keyboard strings and he said, you know what would sound really great is if we could do those strings live. All the stuff that I had written, a guy named David Campbell took all that and wrote it out from cello on the low end to the violins and violas. He played it once through, and then David told us that he had a couple of variations on it. We mixed them all together and actually overlaid them, so the 10 people now sound like 40 people.
Oh, you guys rock!
Yeah, I got 5 hours of sleep last night. It wasn't until about 3 that I actually passed out because I was just like thinking about the album, thinking about all this stuff and all this, you know, all the crap that we've got to do and that we're worried about.
Taking 8 months off and coming in to do a record, I'm like, am I gonna be as good as I was? Can I do what I want to do in my head? Because I'm so hard on myself, I really push my throat to its ultimate level, and when I push it there and I keep doing it, it ends up getting used to it, and then I can push a little bit harder and get a little bit higher or a little bit lower.
You come in here when we're doing vocals and they got candles lit and it's all moody and vibey and cool, and they're just doing their silly vocalist stuff.
Chester has this incredible weird thing when he sings really aggressive. He has like 2 or 3 different voices inside his voice. You can hear 2 or 3 different notes, and it's the strangest thing in the world.
writing stuff about just real life emotion, just stuff that happens to people every day.
Lyrics and stuff, some things that me and Mike talk about, you know, really shouldn't be talked about with other people. But when you write a song, you don't necessarily like want to come out and give it all away, but you want the right perspective.
Getting out all that stuff and just kind of making it like silly therapeutic time, it makes for good music, I think. We started our lyric process and Don just laid into us and told us to rewrite everything.
Did you take it offensively when Don doesn't like lyric?
I have kicked his ass probably 4 times today. Just today. He's turned his left side towards you because his right side is bruised.
Bruised on the inside. It seems a little, just a teeny bit bland, but I mean, everything connects really good and everything. You know, you're keeping it good. You know, you're making a point, but it's just a little.
It's the same problem as the other song.
The thing I like about Don is he's funny and he's really hard.
It's a labor of love.
He knows the gear, he knows how to get the sound, but the song is what is important.
What did you think about today, Don?
I thought it was pretty magical. Almost as magical as this guitar finish.
Yeah, he can make a really bad song sound really good, but is that something that he wants to do? No.
Chester, tell me about today, Chester. How was today? Don can just come in and be like, I know you guys, you know that I mean the best when I say that this is crap.
Today, kids, we rewrote a song for the 97th time. Is that guy? Yeah, it's his fault.
I refer to the little kid in Cleveland. You know, he turns on his radio, and how is this going to hit him the first time he hears it? And then how's it going to hit him the 100th time he's heard it? I want it with tons of depth so that it becomes a classic song.
When the other guys are recording, I love going in the studio and visiting. When I'm recording and writing, I dread it.
In certain times, you know, Mike or Chester, let's say, might write a chorus that's a great chorus, but it's not the greatest chorus.
I know that I'm just going to sit there for 8 to 10 hours just going, what can I write that's better than the thing I just wrote?
It's easier to get just another beginning. It's you know, it's really
It's easier to run.
We were getting towards the end of our recording. We knew we had our deadline, and basically the unthinkable happened. We weren't finished with vocals, and Chester got sick.
Getting sick is like something that's normal, you know? I mean, it happens. Getting sick while you're recording a record is kind of something that you kind of really dread.
It forced Chester to be finishing his vocals while the rest of the record was actually being mixed, which is a big no-no.
Chester, where are we?
We're in New York.
What are we doing?
We're finishing the album and mixing
Why are we doing that?
because I wasn't talented enough to write good parts before we came to mix.
To do that at the last minute was very stressful. It was the most stressful part of the process.
I've been sick for 5 weeks.
Our album would very likely not have come out until 6 months later, or those songs would have just been trashed.
The happy end of the story was that it turned out great. Somewhere I Belong, the chorus of that was actually finished 18 months after the song had begun on the bus on the Ozfest.
There's always like those kind of obstacles that come up in the recording or touring process, and there's, you know, we've found there's always a way to kind of work around that.
We're in New York City. We're here because we're mixing. We're mixing with Andy Wallace.
We're at Soundtrack Studios, not to be confused with the much cleaner and nicer NRG Studios in Burbank, but Andy Wallace works here, and for that reason, we have spent the last 3 weeks. Andy doesn't fit the mold of what you might expect of a mixer working with young, cutting-edge groups. He is the guy who's been doing it for so long that he just is an expert. I mean, Andy mixed Nevermind by Nirvana.
If you pick a record in your mind that's one of your favorite records, he probably mixed it.
When you're recording, you have a different track for every sound. Some of our songs have ended up being 60 plus tracks. And then it comes time at the end of it all to balance it. And that's what Andy does. He decides how loud things should be in the context of the whole song.
Yeah. Just on the very first one, could you write it up just a hair so that it piques the listener's interest?
He's almost like a mind reader. You come in with your song, and without any prompting, he knows what to do with it.
It's like boom, boom type thing. Yeah. And I noticed that earlier, I had to ride the low tom up.
He's a genius at what he does.
I think everybody wants to have Andy Wallace mix their record.
Meteora was a word that caught my attention because it sounded huge.
There's the literal idea behind Meteora. It's this rock formation in Greece that has a monastery sitting on top of it. It almost looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. It's very epic and has this film quality. At the same time that it's so dramatic, it's also very serene.
It's actually a place where people go to find themselves and kind of have a place of solitude.
And it's got this, kind of otherworldly kind of vibe about it. And it had this really great energy. And I really wanted to make a record that kind of lived up to that energy.
I think that in some weird way, in the same way that Linkin Park means not the park, but the band, Meteora doesn't mean the rock formation, it means what this album sounds like.
In terms of the entire band, they were super committed the whole time to doing nothing less than their very best, and that's what they gave it, and I think that's what you hear on the record.
I'm really excited about the album, and even though it hasn't been released yet and we don't know if there's going to be commercial success or not for it, I feel like we've had a success already with Meteora.